All right, good morning, or I guess good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from in the world. Welcome to Crazy Talk. For those of you who have not seen an episode of Crazy Talk before, Crazy Talk is a Facebook Live TV show where I chat with people all across the world about all sorts of things related to mental health. I talk to people with all sorts of letters behind their name, and I talk to people with lived experience. I talk to everyone about mental health. So I'm your host, Lee Thomas. If this is not your first time watching Crazy Talk, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really glad we haven't scared you off. I'm really excited for this episode, episode 26 of Crazy Talk, because I am joined by the incredible Matt Pappas. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Yay. So Matt is a certified life coach and NLP practitioner, as well as an author, podcaster, and co-host of daily recovery support calls. He specializes in overcoming anxiety and working with trauma survivors as they navigate daily life. As a trauma-informed coach and survivor himself, he is keenly aware of the unique struggles that survivors must work through in order to heal, and how anxiety uses tricks and lies to keep us stuck and miserable. His podcast features coaches, clinicians, and advocates who have dedicated their life to helping others in all aspects of mental health. On daily recovery support, he and his co-hosts offer interactive group calls 7 days a week for survivors of complex trauma. Learn more at beyondyourpast.com and follow him on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and we're going to put links to all of those in the comments below at the end of the show. But thank you, Matt, so much for being on the show. Welcome.
It's an honor, Lee. Thanks so much for having me, and I'm glad that we got the whole time things.
It's one of those, no one is in Atlantic time. This is the problem. Right. Like, it's like a handful of provinces and I think a couple states, and that's it.
I'm like, well, Atlantic is like the ocean close to me, and so it's got to be Eastern, so it's got to be the same. It didn't even dawn on me that we were like an hour apart. Didn't even think.
It's one of the, it's happened before and it'll happen again, but I'm so glad that we got you on the show. So I wanted to ask a little bit about kind of the work that you do. Lots of people, unfortunately, like lots of people do experience trauma, but they don't necessarily go on to make it their life's work, basically. So what inspired you to do that?
Well, I mean, I realized that I was a survivor of childhood trauma probably about 2014 ish, like right around that time frame. So I pretty much suppressed what had happened to me for about 30 years. The trauma happened when I was between 5 and 10, but then there was also the bullying that happened in high school and middle school. So by the time I was 18 and kind of becoming an adult, and I pushed everything aside, didn't want to think about it, didn't care about it, didn't even think that it affected me at all. And so I went through my life just doing my thing. And then after my marriage ended in divorce in like around 2013, I realized that I needed to do something. Like, I figured there was something going on, and so I sought out the help of a professional therapist to just kind of help me like make sense of life and figure out where I was going, what I was headed towards, what I had been through. And so we spent a considerable amount of time going through relationship questions and struggles and single parenting and that kind of like family type of stuff. But through a writing assignment that I had been doing with her, it came out that I had written down that I was a survivor of trauma. And that kind of opened up a whole Pandora's box, if you want to call it that, of memories, and like everything just kind of went boom, like came out of everywhere. Like my brain was like, okay, Matt, it's time to deal with this stuff. You've been holding it back for 30 years. Let's deal with it. So I spent the next several years working with a therapist, working with a coach, and started blogging and doing the podcast and whatnot. And I kind of realized that what I was doing in my life, I enjoyed. I mean, as far as like career wise, like I enjoyed, but I wasn't really passionate. I didn't really care that much. I was just kind of a means to keep the lights on and food on the table. And it's just what, you grow up, you go to school, you get a job, you take care of your kids, take care of yourself, and that's it. Well, I'm like, well, there's got to be more. So I realized the more that I started doing blogging and getting into like online chats and doing podcasting and writing, I'm like, I kind of really enjoy this. Like, and I was embracing the process of learning about myself and trying to understand what it meant to be a survivor and where all that was coming from and what I had been through. And so I kind of took it as like an empowering type of thing. So I was reading books and watching videos and joining survivor chats and writing my story. And I'm connecting with survivors all over the world. And I'm thinking, I started to realize that I was really feeling empowered and passionate when I was doing this type of stuff. So over time, I started, continuing all the work that I was doing, and I was doing more podcasts and coming on other shows. And I realized that my calling was no longer in the computer field doing what I had been doing for the last 20 some years. I realized that I had finally found at, my early 40s that I was really passionate about helping other people in the way that I was helped. So I continued doing the work that I was doing. And then I did some research about getting some certifications for trauma-informed coaching, and then going and then learning more about NLP and, what that was and how that could help me. And so it just kind of happened organically to the point where I realized that, I wasn't having like a midlife crisis at 41. I was having like some kind of enlightenment type of thing where I finally found what I was supposed to be doing. So that's kind of where it really was born of, is seeking out help after a divorce. And then it all kind of snowballed into trauma recovery, blogging, and advocacy. And now this is what I'm doing. So.
Yeah, I in kind of entrepreneurship circles, two kinds of entrepreneurs. There's the kind of people who go into it and they're like, I want to be an entrepreneur. What am I going to do as an entrepreneur? And then there are the people who are like, I am really knowledgeable and passionate and enjoy doing this one thing. How do I continue to do that for money? How do I make this? And I definitely, it sounds like you're in that second category, and I definitely put myself in that second category as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like I had never been an entrepreneur in my life. Like I never owned my own business. I owned some websites, and I did some blogging and stuff before, like way before the Survivor stuff, but I always worked for somebody else. But I realized that, I wasn't really going down the road of like business ownership to the point of being like a business manager or doing something where I was out, making and selling widgets or something. Like I wanted to do, I had to figure out a way to make it work to, to keep food on the table, but be able to do what I really wanted to do. And so it's a learning process. There's a lot involved. But the idea is that I'm doing something I love. I'm continuing my own journey. I'm working with other people individually and in groups. I'm still doing my blog and podcast. So it's a very cool experience to be going through. It really is.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that sometimes people can, when it comes to entrepreneurs with mental health issues, there's kind of this idea that people with mental health issues or people who've experienced trauma or, people with anxiety or all this sort of stuff, that we're kind of these delicate flowers that have to be protected from the reality of the world. Right. And this idea that somehow, life is too hard for us to deal with. And I've always found that very frustrating, where people are like, oh, it's so good for you to be, doing the work that you're doing. And I'm like, yeah, but it's good for everyone to be doing the work that they're doing. Like, I don't need this pat on the head. Like right. It's kind of when people, and this is something I guess I've just kind of been processing recently, is this idea that when people say, oh, you're so brave, like you're so brave to be talking about what you're doing. And part of it is like, yeah, I am brave. But part of it is like, do you think it's brave because you think it's embarrassing? Does that make sense?
No, it does. I get that a lot, from my family members, from friends, from peers of, I'm so brave. And yes, I'm brave and I embrace that. But the thing is like when you're a survivor of childhood trauma, or you deal with like debilitating anxiety, or you've got some other mental health challenge, whatever you're going through, like we as a whole are some of the strongest people on the planet. Like we are the most resilient, strong, passionate people you'll find. Yes, we have things we got to work through, and we got struggles, and we've got insecurities, and we may or may not, we may be seeing a therapist or working with a coach or whatever, but we're not as delicate as you might think we are. Like, we've survived all kinds of horrific craziness in our life, and we're still here. So we're automatically strong and resilient, and we've got a reason that we're still here. So, I kind of use that as, something empowering. Is I've been through stuff that many people couldn't even fathom. And, so many people I work with and I've interacted with have been through just unbelievable trauma in all types of ways. But they're still here. They're still fighting. They refuse to give up and give in. So they're using their voice, or they're doing their best to help themselves heal. And to me, that's resilient. That's strong. Like that's inspiring right there.
Yeah, and that word resilient it comes up a lot when it
It
comes
does.
to mental health. And it's one of those things where I don't want to like discount the resilience that people have because I think that's amazing. But I do so much work with youth, and what I hear a lot from grown-ups is this whole idea that, youth today just aren't resilient. And it's not something I can get on board with. I just feel that, maybe they show resilience in a different way, or maybe that, we're used to that whole stuff it all down and don't show anything, and that's resilience. And now we're starting to talk about things and people don't know how to deal with that. Like, what's your take on that? Do you think youth today are just missing resilience, or?
Well, no, I mean, I think it's something that you develop over time. And I mean, everybody shows resilience in different way. I mean, for some people, being resilient is just getting out of bed in the morning, or being able to go to the grocery store, or go see their therapist, or go out and hang out with friends because they have such incredible social anxiety, or they're suffering with, unbelievable depression, or whatever the case may be. So resiliency, I mean, yes, it's something that you develop over time, and you show it in your own way, and everybody does it differently. But to me, anybody that survives any type of trauma, anybody who refuses to give up and wants to keep going, wants to heal, is not letting their circumstances keep them down, even if they struggle. And I mean, I struggle. I mean, we all struggle. But the fact is that you're still refusing to give up. You're still here. You have a message to share, and you have a reason for being here. So, and it's really just one day at a time. And resilience is what you make of it. It's not, there's no cookie cutter resilient.
Yeah, this is what resilience looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And so you mentioned having a message to share, and I know you do a lot of work, like advocacy work, and advocacy was a really important part of my own recovery as well. It was kind of when I realized that, I had gone through all of this stuff, but I could still use my experience to help other people. So do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the role that advocacy has played in your wellness, I guess?
Well, I didn't really think of myself as an advocate initially. I mean, I thought of myself as just like a regular person, and it kind of developed over time. Like it was a very organic, natural process. And, when you first start to heal from whatever it is you're going through, and you start to work with somebody, or you're blogging about it, or you're doing a podcast, or you're writing a book, or whatever it is you're doing, like advocacy just kind of develops over time naturally. And it's something where you don't realize that your story is helping people. And that's what I didn't really realize. Like when I started Surviving My Past several years ago, it was my own little therapy blog. Like I came up with the idea at like 2:00 in the morning, laying in bed, couldn't sleep. I'm like, and I was trying to think of, well, I was journaling in like just my own personal journal. And I'm thinking, well, I'm pretty good at building websites, and I've been online in like social media. So maybe I could take this somewhere, and maybe someday somebody might want to read it. So I was laying in bed, and I'm like, what could I call myself? And I'm like, Surviving My Past. Boom. So I like logged onto my computer at 2:00 in the morning, bought the domain, made this little, WordPress site, and just started writing. Like I was writing 4 or 5 times a week about, literally, I started out with how much my life sucks, and how much pain there is, and how much people don't understand, and where's all this emotion coming from, and why did I go down this path, and it's so hard, and blah, blah, blah. And I just put it out there, and I started, I made a Twitter account and this Facebook, and I just started posting stuff, and lo and behold, people from all over the world are DMing me and emailing me. Oh my God, I can't believe you're talking about this. I resonate with what you're saying. And so I think it's just, I didn't think of myself as an advocate initially. I was more of just trying to use my own story to heal myself and get it out there so I wasn't so stuck up inside. And then as I continued to write, and then I started to do the podcast and, all the other stuff, it kind of just blossomed into advocacy. But now it's something where so many people I talk to, and the people I've interviewed, and people who have guest blogged, and I've been on their show and they've been on mine, like their stories are just mind-blowingly inspiring. And so I enjoy the advocacy part because I know firsthand what it's like to struggle. And I think it's important for us when you're ready, because you have to be ready to be able to share your story. But when you get to that point, it's unbelievably inspiring to share your story with somebody, because you get always there. I mean, there are millions upon millions upon millions of survivors across the world. I mean, 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday. I mean, that's a stat. That's not like BS. So there's survivors all over the world. And then you've got other types of trauma. And so when you can share your story with somebody, and somebody who's reading it a day later, a week later, 10 years later finds it, like that's empowering, because that may have helped them. It may have saved their life. It might have just helped them to feel like they're not alone. So it's just about the power of sharing your story is some of the most incredible work you can do. And I mean, it really just takes only your own bravery to get it out there. And once you do, you become more empowered. It becomes more easy to share. And it's really a neat experience once you get into it, because you're helping yourself and you're helping others. And that's like always a win-win.
Yeah, one of the things I often joke about is that I tell people that I went into advocacy for entirely selfish reasons, right? Like, I'm like, I can't build a time machine. Even if time machines were a thing that could be built, like, I'm not an engineer. I can't build a time machine. So I can't go back in time and help, the person that I was when I was 12 or 13, but I can help 12 or 13-year-olds now. So, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 80 years from now, they aren't, sitting around like I am going, wow, I wish I'd gotten help sooner. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I'm creating the content that I wish I had when I was 12.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of the whole like be the change, blah, blah, blah. But you said something that was really interesting that I want to kind of circle back. And you talked about, I was writing about how much my life sucked and how much pain there was. And I think, and I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think there's kind of a gender thing there as well, too, where men in particular maybe are not encouraged to talk about the pain that they're experiencing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will preface this by saying I think today's guy or today's society is more open to talking about it than what it was 10, 20 years ago. I mean, it's a little more acceptable now, but still, there's the whole stigma of the tough guy, man card, stuff your feelings down, prepare or, stay ready to take care of your family and all this stuff. And, push all your stuff aside. It doesn't matter. It's in the past and you have to be strong and whatever, like all the old stereotypes of, guys not being able to share their feelings because we have to worry about everybody else or because we're not manly enough. So there is, to answer your question, yes, it is a struggle for anybody, but coming from the male side of it, I spent most of my life pushing it aside, pretending it didn't bother me. So I don't know that I was intentionally not dealing with it, but I had just, like, I always say the analogy of, I took all my trauma memories, put them in a shoebox at the bottom of the closet in my mind, and like shoved a bunch of laundry on top so I wouldn't have to see it. And so it was pretty much out of sight, out of mind for decades. So, but then once it started to come out, like I said, it was just like a rush of emotions and everything just kind of went boom. So it is tough for guys to talk about it because of the stereotype and the stigma. But I will say, I think in today's society, thankfully, there's a lot more acceptance for guys to be able to come out and talk about this kind of stuff. And, but still, I mean, there's probably always going to be some type of pressure and stigma. But, like I said, I think there's hope for us to all be on some kind of an even ground where it's okay for a guy to cry. It's okay for a guy to share his story about something and not feel like he's going to be ridiculed by the other manly men on the planet who think he's a wuss or whatever. Like, I don't buy into that crap at all. But it was hard at first because I had to get over my own insecurities. I had to get past the things that I was afraid of, that people were going to judge me and look down on me. And, why did you let that happen? And why couldn't you stop? And what's wrong with you? And all the stuff that I can't stand to hear and that I hear all the time. But yeah, so it is difficult, but it is getting better. I think, at least I want to think it is.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like almost vital to think that it's getting better. You know what I mean? And for me, keeping that hope alive, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think if I thought that I was just swimming upstream constantly and not getting anywhere, that would be hard as an advocate. Like we like to think that the work that we're doing is making a difference, right? Right.
Well, yeah, we are. And I think the stuff we're doing is making a difference, even though we can't always see it. And I think that's something we have to remember is, if you write a blog post or do a podcast or you write poetry or you do some artwork or whatever it is you do, just because you maybe don't get the response that you were hoping for, or something doesn't get as many views as you want, or as many comments or whatever, like, it's the reason we're doing it is to help ourselves and to help others. And, this kind of stuff is, it's timeless. Like, there are always going to be survivors. There have been since the beginning of time. There's probably always going to be. So this stuff that we're doing now, like we said, might help somebody a year, 5 years down the road. And, it might help them incredibly long after we've, maybe we're not doing anymore or whatever, that like we moved on or we're at a different stage. The stuff that we share is going to keep helping people. And so, I have to think that what we're doing, everybody collectively, everybody who shares their story, every survivor, every advocate, every trauma-informed professional, everybody who just refuses to be silent, you're doing amazing work for yourself and for people that you'll never even meet.
That's so huge, and that's so powerful. And sometimes it's intimidating for people to think of the amount of power that they can have in someone else's life, right? I was just having a conversation with someone the other day about how that can really scare the crap out of someone. Basically, the idea that they of influence for someone, that they have the ability to have that much power over another person's life. And that's something that I think, it scares a lot of people. I know we see that a lot in kind of the youth work in, people conversations about mental health, because if I have this conversation, then I'm responsible for whatever comes next. Is that something that you see in the trauma world as well, where people are like, can't open that gate, right? Like, can't have that showed, but I can't do it because what do I do next?
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think the thing to remember is that, like, this is your own journey, your own story. So you're only ultimately, like, I mean, if you're ultimately responsible for you and what you share. I mean, yes, we know that we are affecting other people, so we take it seriously, and you have to be careful. But ultimately, your story is your story, and it's going to help other people. Some people aren't going to resonate with it. Some people are going to, say it doesn't matter, or it does, or invalidate you or whatever. But ultimately, you can only control what you can control. It's your story. Share it the way you want to share it. I understand that your story, your healing is no less or more important than anybody else's. It's for you. And the fact that we're helping people along the way, yes, it's super important. And, yes, you want to be careful and be cognizant of other people's feelings. But ultimately, now if you're working one-on-one with with somebody, that's different. But when you're blogging, you're podcasting, this is your story to share how you want to share it. And, you're going to help people, and people are going to resonate with you, and some people won't, and that's okay. So it's really just saying what you want to say in a way that feels in complete compliance with you, your values, your personality, your morals, everything. So you can go to bed at night saying, hey, I'm doing the best I can for me. I'm helping other people, and I can only control what I can control. So.
Yeah, and I think there is something so powerful about storytelling. That's one of the things that I often say during my speaking presentations that I do is, there's nothing particularly special about me, right? Like, I'm not an Olympic athlete, and I'm not a celebrity, and I'm not even Twitter famous, right? And so if I can go through a really hard time and come out the other side of it, like, if I can do that, that means you can do it too. And I think it's that social proof, I guess, that can give people a lot of hope, and hope is everything, really.
Well, it is. Yeah. And I mean, and like, I think it's good that more, celebrities or Twitter famous people or whatever are kind of coming out now and sharing about things they've been through. I think it's good. It's great. Like, everybody needs to. But for me, I'm not necessarily inspired by a Hollywood superstar or like an athletic superstar. I mean, I'm glad that they're helping themselves and healing. Absolutely. But I'm more inspired by John Q survivor, Jane Q survivor, everyday person who's like, I survived horrific abuse, and I was in a traumatic home, and I was bullied in school, and all these horrible things happened to me, but I'm using my story to help others. I refuse to give up, and I still struggle, and I'm transparent about it. I'm doing my best to help myself, and I want to help other people. Like, I get more inspired by that than somebody famous who sends out one tweet and gets like 50,000 retweets, and everybody's like, oh my God. And I'm like, no, like, let me because I'm just an everyday person too. Like I'm in York, Pennsylvania, and you know, I'm a survivor and I blog and I coach and I do all these things. But at the end of the day, I'm just regular old me, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that that's, that's more than okay, right? Because that gives permission for other people who, also feel like I'm just this regular old person to talk about some of what they're experiencing. Like
Right.
so a lot of my background is in like eating disorders and that sort of thing. And so I know that for me, every single example of eating disorders that I knew was a famous celebrity with anorexia, right? And again, like nothing wrong with them having that experience, because absolutely I want them to be authentic about the experiences that they're having, but it was not relatable for me, right? Like it was not. And so when I got into kind of sort of group therapies and seeing regular old people, average Joe who's living with an eating disorder and still living their life, that was inspiring to me. Like that's where the difference happened for me.
Yep.
So, being quote unquote ordinary, I think can kind of be like a superpower when it comes to sharing your story.
Oh, absolutely it is. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, we as everyday people relate to everyday people because it's kind of like we're on this like same level playing field, or, we feel, like when you see a celebrity or an athlete, it's like they're in another stratosphere, they're living a life that we could only maybe dream of or whatever. And it's not that their situation is minimized or less important. It's just that to me, and maybe it sounds like for you too, that's not as relatable to a superstar as it is to an everyday person who's just living their life and going through the struggles of, waking up in the morning and dealing with everyday life and all the stuff that comes with it, because, that's who I relate to. That's who I am. And so I find empowerment in being around my same kind of people, I guess, for lack of a better term. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many other things that I want to ask you about, and I don't know which thread to follow, but unfortunately it's already 5:26 in
Oh my
Atlantic
God.
time.
Wow.
So we've been like burning through our time, and it's been absolutely fantastic having you on the show. So for the folks who are watching and who are thinking like, wow, Matt is incredible, I definitely need to connect with him, what are some ways that they can do that?
Well, yeah, the easiest way is you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. Just search for Beyond Your Past. You go to my website, beyondyourpast.com. That's my coaching, where you can learn more information about the anxiety work that I do, the trauma recovery work, the daily support calls that you mentioned. Or if you want to read more of the survivor blog that I started, it's called survivingmypast.net. And everything will be linked, in the show notes and whatnot. But if you go to any of those websites, you'll find me. Send me a DM or an email. I'd love to connect with you. And yeah, I mean, if you want to share your story, come on my show or write a guest blog, just contact me, because I'm always looking to connect with people who want to reach out and not be silent.
Oh, the internet's such a great place, right? Like I can't imagine 40 years ago, like, and needing to write letters to magazines. Like I can't imagine. Now we've got blogs, right? Like it's incredible.
Yeah.
So Matt, thank you so much for being on the show. Again, it's been an absolute joy having you on here. For those of you who are watching this show and going, wow, Crazy Talk is fantastic, I absolutely want to get episodes of this show directly to my inbox. You can do that by signing up for my mailing list, and I will put a link to that mailing list sign up in the comments below, probably like 5 minutes after this show ends. If you're watching this episode and it's really resonated with you and you think that it would resonate with some of the people in your life, feel free to, give us a like, give us a share, let the people in your life know who need to hear about this, know about this. So other than that, thank you all so much for tuning in on this beautiful Saturday. I will be back next Saturday at 12:30 Atlantic time, and I'll be chatting with Brian Cardoza. So that's very exciting. And I will see all of you then. Take care, everyone.